Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday, February 26, 2026. Now, I actually was thinking about this yesterday, and it's actually kind of funny. Didn't time it this way at all, but today is the 26th of February, the 26th year, 2026, and this is the 26th episode of me doing this. So 26, 26, 26, it's just funny how that kind of landed. So anyway, found that kind of funny. Welcome in, guys. Good morning to you all. Thank you guys for being here. Today, I've got just a few articles I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to begin talking about the mortgage news daily and where the mortgage rate sits currently. We're going to start there. And then I've got a few good articles here. One, and it might be a little bit of a shorter episode today. I've only got 3 articles. So lucky you guys. You don't have to sit here and listen to me talk all day long. So this article here is AARP quietly releases key guidance on mortgage rates and real estate. And this will be by The Street. We're going to talk about that article. Then we've got another article by Inman. It is titled, What High-Performing Real Estate Agents Do Differently from the Rest. Read through this. I'll give you some of my thoughts on this and some of my action items as well as we talk about this. Then we're going to go into our final article, and it is Seller Signals, Early Clues that Someone in Your Sphere is Thinking About Moving. So we're going to talk through all these scenarios. The interesting thing is that as I was reading through these articles, it's like they were resonating with what I did on the live stream on Tuesday morning, talking about the current state of the economy. And then at the end of that episode, I started talking about things you can do as real estate agents. And these articles kind of resonated with exactly what I was talking about there. So I thought, well, this is kind of a good correlation to end this week of my live streams. Just so you guys know, too, I live stream Monday through Thursday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, right here where you're watching it. TikTok, Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, all those other places. So wherever you like to watch, that's great. I think you guys for taking the time to do so. Greatly appreciate that. But I do that every single week, Monday through Thursday. I did not have a live stream yesterday. I had to be on the road traveling and had some meetings, so I wasn't able to do that. But I try to keep that schedule. So just kind of be looking for me. You can always go back and watch all of these live streams and go back and look at them and pull some information out of it if you want to. They stay recorded on the obvious platform, YouTube. That's where they stay, live in the channel there. So feel free to go over there and subscribe and check me out. So with all that being said, let me get some things situated real quick, and we're going to jump straight into this show today. I think I got everything set up. Yes, we do. All right, we are good to go. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam, and today we're cutting through the noise. We're going to get to the truth in the news, look at the data, and I'm going to give you some of my observations and where I believe you can find opportunity. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our very first story. And today's first story is not really a story. I want to begin with the mortgage rate currently. So that's where we're going to start at. For those on TikTok, I will share my screen. You guys have access. I keep mentioning this app. I'm going to keep doing so. I think it's just a quick way to kind of get to the information when we need to. And it is Mortgage News Daily, the app. So if you open this up right now, those on YouTube, you can see my screen. You can see where it's sitting at right now. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. But let me share with you guys on TikTok here. Yep, there is. There we go. There we go. Yep. It's red. Dang it. But it's really not that bad. So if you really look at this right here, what are we looking at, right? We're looking at right around 6%. You'll see that 0.01% plus. So yes, we did increase a little bit on the mortgage rate. But it's not a lot. It's funny. A couple of days ago, I was talking about, hey, we're under 6% for the first time in 4 years. But if you watch that live stream, you'll know exactly what I was even saying. It's like, yeah, a little bit of a tease, probably going to inch back up just a little bit, maybe come back down. It's more of just trying to build some, confidence into the market, that kind of stuff. So they're playing with the number just a little bit. Really, it didn't change much as far as finances go. 0.01% marginal at best. So we're still at a really good interest rate. We're sitting at 6.00%, 6% flat for the 30-year fix. We're sitting at 5.62 for the 15-year. And then if you get into like the ARMs and stuff, you get into about 5.38, and the FHA is 5.65, and then VA is 5.67. So if you qualify for those type of loans, very good loans, very good rates. So be sure to check that out. You can download the app, Mortgage News Daily, and check that out. I'm not an affiliate of them at all. They don't do that. This is just an app that I use every single day. I think it's just a great, handy app to have. They also have some really good articles and stuff you can check out. Talks about the mortgage rates, like especially like right now, there's one in here that says mortgage rates mostly holding long-term lows. So you can check out that article too if you go to their website and read through that. So there you go. Just to start off the live stream, we'll start with the interest rate. With that being said, now let's actually dive into our very first story. And like I said, this first story is basically talking about AARP's blunt take on mortgage rates and what home equity looks like for an older demographic, the 50 plus older demographic. And what they're really kind of doing here is AARP is kind of giving some insight for seniors, highlighting some kind of how high rates are I tend to kind of locked in a lot of the older demographics, a lot of the older homeowners into properties they may no longer need. It doesn't really serve their needs, their physical or financial needs. So they're going to be talking through a strategy here on how to help that demographic and what that demographic should be doing in response to the current market that we're in. I've spent a lot of time in this show specifically talking about just the lock-in effect, where the interest rates are, where the mortgage industry is, and where the overall real estate industry is. And I've kind of made my argument. I'm pretty much resting on this, and it's the older demographic that has significant life changes is probably your most low-hanging fruit as far as real estate agents out there for the most transactions that's going to come from this year is probably that demographic. Mainly because the millennial and the younger adults with families got hit the hardest as far as the affordability gap goes. Doesn't mean they can't buy. Don't get me wrong. It's just the majority, I think, is going to come from this older demographic. They have the most life changes, and they also have the income. They have a lot of equity, and that's where this is going to be at. Now, what this article is going to be talking about, this article is going to be kind of going into talking about, like, well, HELOCs, like HELOC loans, using your equity to maybe do some improvements on your houses and that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about this because there's Dave Ramsey, and not that I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey, he actually makes a statement in this article too. And there's some things that we need to be thinking through when we start talking about loan options and mortgage options for our clients. And we need to be very aware about the pros and the cons of these things, because we can go in there and quickly start advising based on a headline and say, hey, this is a great idea for you. And really, we got to be a little careful, especially if we don't fully understand what that means. So let's talk about this, and then we will I'll kind of give you my observations and my opinions on this as we kind of go through this. So let's go ahead and get started. This first article is being offered by TheStreet.com. Again, it's by Jeffrey Quiggle. He writes a lot about the real estate in the column on The Street. I read his articles quite often. And here it is. The title is AARP quietly releases key guidance on mortgage rates and real estate. It says the nonprofit advocacy group for Americans over 50 offers major insight on new real estate news. Then it says, but Dave Ramsey disagrees. So there's a little bit of a tension there. And I'm not surprised Dave Ramsey would disagree with some of these type of things. It makes sense because of what they are. It's just kind of going into more debt, but let's kind of keep going. I got to redo my screen here so it fits. This is not formatted right. There we go. All right. The key points here is mortgage rates dropped to 5.99%, the first time below 6 since September of 2022. Besides a very brief period on January 9th, 2026, which was like literally not even a day. So we held below 5.99 for a couple days. It has now just reached right back up to 6. I just showed that. It says AARP highlights benefits of HELOCs for accessibility, home improvement, and financial flexibility. And then it says, but Dave Ramsey strongly warns that taking a loan from your home's equity is a bad idea. So here's the point of tension. And I think it's a very good thing to have this where AARP is suggesting an option and then Dave Ramsey's given kind of a rebuttal against it. Because especially as real estate agents, we need to be able to take both sides of the aisle here and come to an understanding about the pros and cons of how this works so we can help navigate, the best options for our clients in this market. So we need to be kind of stewards of this, paying attention. Doesn't mean I disagree with HELOCs. It doesn't mean I fully agree with Dave Ramsey. It's somewhere in the middle because I think there's use cases. I think we can't just take a definitive line here. I think there are certain situations where it might make sense. So let's go ahead and continue on. I want to speak to prospective homebuyers and homeowners considering refinancing their mortgages about an intriguing new development regarding mortgage rates, newly reported by Mortgage News Daily, referencing what I just talked about a minute ago. He's setting the stage what this article is for. From what I've observed through my years of reporting on real estate and other finance topics, it's a relatively rare occurrence when Mortgage News Daily's Chief Operating Officer, Matthew Graham, releases an early report. This coverage, there are so many pop-ups on this. This is ridiculous. Guys, come on. This coverage is coming out earlier than normal due to a more interesting headline than normal. Graham wrote, quote, "The average top-tier 30-year fixed rate fell back to 5.99% today, matching the level seen only briefly back on January 9, 2026, when the Fannie Freddie bond buying plans were announced. That mortgage rate is an important event to follow because it marked the first time the 30-year fixed rate fell below 6 since September of 2022. Now, the COO, is it COO? I think it said COO, yeah. Of Mortgage News Daily said, quote, "Much like the last time, there's always a risk that something happens to prompt a bond market reversal today. If that happens, mortgage lenders could raise rates in the middle of the day." Now, it didn't actually happen. They didn't, that same day that the interest rate dipped below 5.99%, it stayed there for a whole day going into the very next day. Now, today we sit at just right at 6%. So it did do a little bit of adjusting, but again, I mean, we're talking about 0.01% here, guys. All right, as it turned out, there was not much reversal. Yeah, it kind of stayed that way. Okay, now, this is where AARP, given the organization, gave some guidance to home equity and mortgage rates in regards to the demographic that is engaged with their model, right? The 50-plus-year-olds, right? And it says, if interest rates and mortgage rates continue to decrease as they have since fall of 2025, a rise in people seeking cash out refinance or home equity line of credit, which is called HELOC, can be expected. Lower borrowing costs make tapping home equity more attractive. So what it says, and this is kind of what this is, it says a cash out refinance replaces your current mortgage with a new, larger one. Okay, so a cash out refinance is going to replace your current mortgage with a new, larger one. You get the difference in cash, so you get the difference, right? This is, everybody knows what refinancing is. And the new loan often has a fixed rate. Okay, so that's the typical cash out refinance. In other words, I've got my home, maybe I have a 6% interest rate on my home, maybe I have a 6.5 or a 7, and I have a lot of equity. I then get the appraisal out, I go through the process, reclose, and refinance my house, and I take equity out. I can take whatever I want as long as it meets appraised value. I take that equity out of the home, thereby increasing my loan. Now, it's a new loan, so you do all the underwriting, you get everything ready again, you have another closing, and then you get the equity. All right, you still only have one mortgage, though. You still only have one. And it's not like you've opened up a line of credit. It's just something you now have gotten a chunk of money off of the equity of your house. So you've just increased your payment. You've just now decreased your equity. That's the game. That's the cash out refinance option. The next one is the HELOC. And this is where they get into the next point. A HELOC is a second mortgage that allows you to borrow against your equity as needed, typically with a variable rate and interest-only payments during the draw period. All right, so if we kind of put this into perspective, what a HELOC is, you got to get the idea. You have a mortgage already, and you now are wanting to take the equity out. But instead of going through a refinancing phase and getting it all in one lump sum, you can open up a second mortgage that then allows you to draw up to a certain amount based off your equity and appraisal off that amount for multiple times. So you can draw monthly off that if you want. Sometimes they can set up to be weekly or whatever, but usually it's monthly. You can draw that money in for multiple times, thereby using it for different expenses of maybe improving your home, doing something with that, paying off higher debt, that kind of stuff. That's a HELOC. But now the risk there is the variable rate part, right? It's a variable rate. And a lot of times if you have, let's say you have a 6 month to a year, draw period, typically you're only paying against the interest of that loan. You're not actually reducing that loan debt. So that sets the stage for what a HELOC is. So if we think about a HELOC versus a cash out refinance, both of them are taking advantage of the equity in your house, which is putting you more and more into debt. Now, there is some use cases for this, but I would strongly advise people to be very cautious about running into these. I think there's a little bit of a risk there for sure, because you got to pay back debt. Or if you pass away, God forbid, or when you get old and you retire and that kind of stuff, you now have more debt. So your estate becomes less valuable to those you're leaving it to. So there's a little bit of a risk there, and it is more debt. All right. Now we understand the two differences. I think most of you guys would know that, but let's continue on. All right. AARP, the nonprofit advocacy group for Americans over 50, offers its perspective on home equity. It says home equity is a powerful thing, wrote Ali J. Yell for AARP. Quote, and if you're like many older homeowners, you probably have quite a bit of it. I would say that's true. You know, we're coming out of a major inflation era where homes were going up in appreciation month over month at extremely alarming rates, to be honest. And now people are sitting on a huge amount of equity. And so it's very tempting. AARP is making the argument that this is an opportunity for those that need to take advantage of a HELOC to do so. It goes on to say, well, now it says here, AARP focused specifically on HELOCs. HELOCs are advantageous in that they let you access your home equity over an extended period. Instead of giving you a one-time lump sum payment, as other loans do, you get a line of credit. You can then withdraw funds from that credit line for years to come. Another distinguishing feature, you can use the funds from a HELOC for any purpose. And that's true too. You can do whatever you want with that money. You basically just open yourself up a line of credit for that money. Do whatever you want with that money. Okay, it's your money, it's your equity. You're taking cash out of your home. You can draw on it for multiple times, months on end, and that kind of stuff. So maybe even multiple years. All right, so it depends on how much equity you guys have there. All right, AARP identifies smart ways to use a home equity loan. It goes in to say, homeowners often turn to home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, for practical, cost-effective ways to manage expenses and improve long-term stability. Using a HELOC to make your home more accessible. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about HELOCs. Like, throw in some comments. Give me your opinions about pro, con, thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you guys think about this? What's your experience with doing HELOCs? If anyone out there have done a HELOC or know somebody that did it, or have you advised someone to do it or not to do it? Give us some feedback. Let me know in the comments here what you guys think. Using a HELOC to make your home making your home more accessible. All right, so this is where the argument kind of comes in, okay? So let's just pause for a second, because what they're going to be talking about is nursing homes, usability of the house, safety features, handicap accessibility, those type of things, right? So let's say you are of the older demographic and you're aging and you live in a house that is not conducive for the state of where you are. So the argument that AARP is making here, that this is a way to basically open up a line of credit off of the equity of your house to make the necessary improvements or adjustments to where you currently live, thereby avoiding having to go into like a nursing home or assisted living, which can be super expensive. Let's be honest, living facilities, and they kind of get into this. If you read the article here, it says $25,000 to $117,000 per year based on Genworth survey that assisted living facilities can cost. So if you can draw, the argument they're having here is if you have a lot of equity on your house and you need to roll money over and get that house more conducive for the state of your life currently, then maybe this is a direction you could go. And there's an argument to be had there. What I would say, anytime you do anything with finances, anything like this big that also puts you in a higher debt, I would get in front of a financial advisor, CPA, or somebody that is in your books that can advise you and do the math for you to kind of go through these numbers to see if this is a good idea or not. All right, the next thing is aging in place often requires upgrades such as improved lighting, wider doorways, grab bars, walk-in showers. All those type of things require money, and a lot of people don't have the money, but they're sitting on the equity in their house, but they don't necessarily want to move. They like their location. Maybe they're close to family that can take care of them. So this is where a HELOC could make sense, right? It says interest on a HELOC may be tax deductible when used to buy, build, or substantially improve a home. So again, something to go talk to your CPA about. All right, it says using a HELOC to repair or improve your house. HELOC funds can cover essential repairs like replacing a roof, fixing a water heater, things that are just the core components of a house. It gives you the ability to be able to do those kind of renovations. Kitchen remodels, room additions can increase property value, right? So these are all things. If you're thinking that's going to happen, if you think I'm going to take a HELOC out, I'm going to make some improvements on my house, add some square feet maybe even, what kind of value am I looking at? Why not call a trusted real estate agent in to do a little bit of an analysis on the property and what that actually would do for you and make sure the cost effectiveness is correct. Just word of advice. Some homeowners use HELOCs to renovate investment properties for flips or long-term rentals. So there's a way to even do that. Right? Like if you have a lot of equity in your house, maybe you want to invest in some kind of rental. Check with what your loan is offering you, if that's allowed or not. Most HELOCs allow you to do whatever you want. But make sure it works. And if that's the case, maybe you can increase your income that would then offset any kind of extra debt or help you to pay off that HELOC quicker, thereby reducing all debt in general and setting yourself up with some income. So another scenario that might make sense to free up some cash to make some more investments. So again, a good argument for HELOC. Using a HELOC to pay off higher interest debts. HELOCs often carry lower interest rates, right? They're typical mortgage, so they will typically run a lot lower rate. You won't get a HELOC for the same rate that you got your mortgage rate in. You're not looking at below 6, but it's going to be still way lower than if you have a high credit card debt that your monthly expenses are through the roof. That's a valid option. HELOC rates are typically about half those of credit cards. Expert caution that borrowers should avoid accumulating new credit card debt after paying off old balances. And they're addressing the bad habits, right? They're talking about bad habits. If you're in debt, not because you've had maybe some life circumstances pop up and you needed to have an emergency and then you use that, still, man, I'd like to have some, savings and emergency funds. But if you had to do that for that, it's a little different. But if there's a problem with spending and it's out of control and it's out of whack, then paying off these debts is not going to fix the problem. You're just going to pay them off and probably not change the habit and end up in a much, much worse situation. And I will add, that's unfortunately in America, debt is so pervasive, and especially in credit cards. So before you use a HELOC just to pay off debt, you got to change your behaviors a lot, right? Using a HELOC to cover medical debt, another argument for that, right? You might have a high medical bill that helps you to pay that off a lot quicker, thereby saving you some money. Using HELOC to provide a financial safety net, a HELOC can serve as an emergency buffer for unexpected expenses without accruing interest until funds are drawn. You can open up that line of credit, but you don't have any actual debt just because it's just set up. You're not actually drawing from it. So you're not increasing your debt. You just have it set up that if emergency did come up, you have a quick access to your equity in your home for cash. And so that's an argument to be done as well. Compared with reverse mortgages, HELOCs typically involve far lower fees, making them a more affordable way to access home equity. Now, that's the arguments. That's all arguments for a HELOC. And there's many situations on where that might play out and make sense. As real estate agents, there's two things we're doing here. I'm talking to consumers and people over 50 that maybe are looking at this and thinking through these options and hearing about this circulate. These are things to be thinking about. And those as real estate agents to be paying attention, be listening on how this works and know these models so you can help advise your clients correctly in what is good for them. And if you don't understand, again, don't lean into something you don't fully understand. I would not insert myself into a situation like this if I do not fully understand what all is entailed into that. And a lot of times in these situations, I would be advising them to go talk to their estate planner, financial planner, CPA, that kind of stuff to talk about this. But it doesn't hurt for us to give observations and some advice in regards to what we do know and just the pros and cons of each, right? I think that's an okay thing. Now, we're going to get into what Dave Ramsey has to say, because Dave Ramsey is the polar opposite of saying he's against HELOCs. And what is his opinions in regards to this? It says, for people living paycheck to paycheck, even a small setback can throw their whole budget off balance, and the big surprises can feel impossible to absorb. It goes on, if a person is a homeowner, they might start wondering whether tapping their home's equity through a HELOC could offer some breathing room. And that's the pressure that you have. That's that tension that you have. You want to try to alleviate some of the stress in your life by, you're sitting on all this equity, so you are more prone to go into that route. What does Dave Ramsey says? Dave Ramsey advises against it. He just simply advises against it. And what does he say? He says, stop what you're doing right now and throw that idea back where it came from. Taking a loan from your home's equity is a bad idea. He goes on to say, not only are you going into more debt, you're putting the roof over your head at risk. If you take out that loan and can't pay it back, your house is on the line. Just don't do it. So that's his opposing view. It's very short, very succinct, and very direct. And he's not necessarily wrong. Anytime you're going into debt, you're increasing the risk of what is being held by that debt. So with a credit card, what is it? Credit score and everything like that. There's not really anything tangible. It's going to take a roof over your head. When you take out equity or loan on your home, you're jeopardizing the very home that you live in. So if you can't pay back the debt that you're incurring, then you are at risk of losing the roof over your head. So that's the fair argument. And if you don't have a plan to be able to pay back the HELOC, and it's just a way to access the equity, but you're just putting into, things that don't return value, then you're just losing the money and going into debt, which then aids into that human nature to buy and have things and accumulate things and not necessarily grow wealth. So what I would say is first and foremost, obviously not a financial planner, none of that. But what I would do is go talk to those people that are and run all these scenarios by them. But when I start reading things like this, I have to pause. And I'm like, man, that should be the last resort, to be honest. There are other ways to kind of adjust to this and make strategic moves to not jeopardize my own home by going into more debt. And a lot of times, sometimes emotionally, we just don't want to move. When in reality, if we're really wanting to access our equity in our houses, maybe the person who's thinking about doing a HELOC should absolutely consider selling and rolling those funds into a smaller, more concise and manageable property that fits their needs without increasing their debt, and doing the actual opposite is reducing their debt. So I would be very cautious going into more debt just to pay for living expenses. I think if you're doing that, you're already at a deficit. It's not really going to fix your problem. It's kind of putting a Band-Aid on it, but it's not really fixing the wound necessarily, right? If you need stitches, you need stitches, right? The Band-Aid's not going to do anything. It's just going to scar you. And I think in the reality is, if you're going this route just to fix a eternal problem of more things and living expenses and not cutting costs, I think you're just setting yourself up to be more in debt later. So, and that's where Dave Ramsey's really leaning into it. It's like, man, this is not addressing the behavior of man. It's addressing the kind of the results of those habits, not necessarily fixing the problem. It's not the cure, right? It's not the cure. So I think there's a lot of insight inside of this. It's something that when interest rates go down and new mortgages start being talked about, I won't say new, they've been around for a long time, but when these type of stuff happens and there is a more confidence in the market, you start seeing more and more of this kind of stuff come out. And I'm not surprised that now we're talking about HELOCs and cash out refinances and all that kind of stuff. Makes sense. Happens every single time. So that's what we're seeing here. So what does that mean? What would I do? Like, if I have all this information, what are the action items that I would tell you that I would consider doing? Well, I would go through and understand what right sizing looks like. Like, if somebody is raising a family in a home, and in your area, in your local area, in a subdivision that maybe has 4-bed, 2 baths, or 3-bed, 2 baths, and they could downsize into a much smaller house that is more conducive to what their lifestyle is now, and what areas of your community that is in, I would have conversations like that. I would have a very good understanding in my local market where people are moving from as they're right sizing their home. I wouldn't just sell the house just to sell the house. I would sell the house to change my lifestyle, to reduce my outgo and minimize and bring more simplicity to my life. And you, as the real estate agent, show them the math on how that equity of selling can offset all those higher rates, right? And how that can increase the quality of life without actually going into more debt. I think that's the right conversation to have. That's what I would do. I would lean very heavily into that. I would also get very good at understanding the value of the homes in your market and being able to quickly go in and do an equity analysis on people's homes. If you're going to talk to somebody about listing their home and making a move, the only thing that really matters to them is the amount of equity they're going to walk away from. Doing a net proceeds sheet when you have a meeting with somebody so they can see what their take-home money is if it's sold for this price is the only motivator. It's like, if I'm going to sell my house, what's my bottom dollar? Like, how much money am I going to walk away from? And then being able to analyze that and show that same client what they can buy in return with that cash makes all the difference in the world of that person listing a house or not listing a house. And you ultimately serving them well and helping them through this process. So I would spend more time being very much aware of what's going on in my local market as far as value is concerned. That's where you need to be spending your time at. So I would be doing a lot more research and being in the data. Yep, it's kind of boring, but guys, that's what we are called to do. We are supposed to do that. We've got to be the advocates for our clients and helping them navigate. I mean, you can just see from this one article what we're talking about here, the difficulty of being able to navigate this. It's not just straightforward. You know, a lot of people are reading this like, oh, wow, I'm in financial problems. HELOC? Wow. They call the lender. Lender wants to make the money and wants to make a sale. They're going to sell them on the HELOC, right? They make some money off of that. They're going to sell them on the HELOC. Not all lenders, but some will. And is that the best option for them, right? We need to be the advocate. We need to be their advocate. So with all that being said, that kind of wraps that one up. Yeah, there you go. Hopefully that's helpful, guys. If it is, let me know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I hope that it is. All right, quick swig of coffee. And we're going to jump into our second article of the day. We're switching gears to wrap up this week with some really tangible things to help real estate agents. And the title of this article, and this is by Inman.com, and this goes right along with at the core of what I believe. As far as what a real estate agent is, what we do, how we operate, how we grow a business, this is at the core of that. And the title of this, it says, what high-performing real estate agents do differently from the rest. All right. What he's going to make the argument for is, and this is, I'm going to call it like the secret sauce, right? It's not about the secret sauce. There is no secret sauce. It's not even about the new technology. It's not about the lead generation that you can do. It's not about the highest performers that are winning because they're doubling down on, you know, just their social media marketing and just blasting everything out there. What he's making an argument for is that your highest performers, those that are truly in this, are winning by doubling down on what I'm going to call boring consistency. Boring consistency and high touch communication. And I say boring consistency because it's not fun and it's not flashy. Most often, the boring consistency takes you outside of your comfort zone. It's the things you don't enjoy doing. It doesn't really make you feel emotional. It's like, wow, that was exciting. I got myself out there. Look at that photo. I look really good, and all those kind of things. It is being consistent, doing the same things every single day and doing the things that actually get results. And that's where I would say the high touch communication. And that's what this article is going to be talking about. So I was like, yep, I'm going to feature this one because this resonates. This is what I would say I would do. This is not, you know, YouTube guru stuff. 5 points of selling the next 50 homes. It's not that. It's literally talking about a business and how to run a business and think like a business owner. And that's what I like about it. So let's get into it. It says most agents use the same tools, chase the same clients, and wonder why they plateau. Coach Daryl Davis writes, here's what the top performers do differently. Okay, this is by Daryl Davis. It says, Tiffany McQuade has built the kind of real estate business most agents want and might even claim, but few actually create. What? What do they create? One where clients become advocates. Referrals. Referrals arrive without asking, and the competition largely becomes irrelevant. Man, I love that. I love that statement because what we're really doing is if we're serving our clients really, really well and we're providing just an excellent service to them, they become advocates of ours. They're fans of ours. They want to send us business. And then what does that do? Oh, well, at least referrals arrive without asking. I no longer have to ask for business. Because I represented my clients so well, they became advocates for me. Thereby, they want to refer people to me without me even having to ask. And then the byproduct of that, I don't have to worry about what the competition is doing because it's irrelevant because I've built a business that has advocates that generates referrals for me without me having to do anything, and I don't have to care about the competitors. That one sentence summarizes a good business owner. It really does, because it's about the people. All right, it says, as the founder of a Naples, Florida-based brokerage and author of the Nth Degree, How to Stand Out by Going All In, McQuade has spent years developing a repeatable approach to differentiation, one grounded less in flashy technology or bigger budgets and more in intentional experiences, strategic visibility, and the kind of consistent follow-through that turns a single transaction into a decade-long relationship. Man, I can't stress this enough. This is exactly what I would say to do. I would tell every single one of my agents, you want to build a business, you lean into that kind of thought. That is what you craft. That is what you work on, right? They aren't theoretical. They're field tested in one of the country's most competitive luxury markets, and most of them are available to any agent willing to think differently about how they show up. All right. Skill gaps hide in good markets. They go on to say this. Every agent knows the market has shifted. We talk about that all the time right here. I talk about the shift, this weird stagnation of a market, right? We're talking about this almost every single day. This is the conversation we're having. Fewer know how much that shift has exposed the difference between agents who are genuinely skilled and those who are simply operating in a forgiving environment. That's a very profound statement. I'm going to finish this off and we'll elaborate a little bit more. McQuade is direct on this point. Always be training and educating yourself to get sharper, more skilled, especially in today's market. She points to negotiation training. Chris Voss's work in particular as underutilized by most agents, along with building robust resource packets. The agents who adapt fastest to tighter conditions aren't necessarily the most experienced. They're the most prepared. Deliberate skill development, treated as non-negotiable as lead generation, is what creates that edge. If we break this down, guys, like if you were to if you go to my YouTube channel right now, you read my mission statement, you watch my introductory video, my intro video, the welcome video, all that kind of stuff. This is what I'm screaming from the rooftops. When I come on here and I go live, this is what I'm being a proponent of. I'm trying to get everybody to understand is all the flash and the trophies out there. There's a place, but the reality is the focal point is the consumer. The focal point is developing advocates that you just give such a good experience to, you protect at all costs, that they want to talk about you. Your whole focus is not on what you're doing and me, it's on that experience for that client and their experience. And when you focus in there, the rest of that follows. It just follows. If you're dropping balls at all these different locations, trust me when I say that your business is in a trajectory of decline. You might still be up high, but if your consistencies are dropping and the experience of the clients is dropping with it, over time, you will work yourself out of business because they get less and less excited about working with you. They do less and less referring. I mean, she goes on, always be training and educating yourself. Look, if you buy into the idea that you've arrived, like I have done this and I've been doing this for so many years and I know how to do this, I understand this, and that's your attitude. And when you go to any kind of training, you sit in the training and you're like, just phasing off, or maybe you're on your phone texting and everything like that, and you're not engaged in the class just because you have the idea that you already know everything they're talking about and this is boring, you have limited your own growth. You've already done it. Because I have been doing this for 20 years, and every single class I go to, right, when I go to a convention, I sit in, and I don't even actively listen and sell. That's not what I do. But when I go to these classes where they are training, man, I'm taking notes, I'm listening, I'm learning new things. There's tons of new information because the market is always shifting. It's always changing. It's this elusive target that just moves around every single year and every month sometimes. And I got to keep adjusting and pivoting and trying to hit that target. And there's different tactics and there's different technology. There's all these things going on. And if you're not in the room being trained and educating yourself, you're getting left behind, right? You're getting left behind. So, I mean, there's many, many good points here. All right. It says this. It goes on to say this. Your competitors are telling you exactly where not to advertise. The most crowded marketing channels in real estate aren't usually crowded because they work best. What a profound statement. They're crowded because agents default to what's familiar. Real estate portals, social media, MLS adjacent placements. The result is a high-cost race for attention where differentiation is nearly impossible. Do you see how much I can unpack this? I mean, just right now, guys, right now, when we get done here, go in to Facebook, TikTok, Instagram right now, and start looking at other realtors and what they've posted. You will see just a common theme throughout the whole thing. Everybody's doing the exact same thing, right? And they're marketing in the exact same way. There is zero differentiation going on whatsoever. It's all the same. And that's what we see. We see that across all these platforms, right? And then if you start talking about the real estate portals, man, you guys are just forking out the money for those real estate portals, making them billionaires. And at the same time, your ROI on those, your return on investment, is very low. Yeah, because everybody else is doing it. You're in the office, and the next person says, yeah, I pay $2,000 a month, and I get 50 leads, and I'm selling all kinds of real estate and that kind of stuff. Yeah, well, you maybe might be true. You're probably selling a lot of real estate right now, but what's that 1099 look like at the end of the year, right? How much expenses do you have? Like, how much money have you shoveled out to make that closing? Like, is that a sustainable model when the market does shift? Is that sustainable? Is your model going to work when there is a shift? Because it's coming. That's what happens. So you got to do something different here, right? What works best, right? Where do you focus, right? McQuade took a different approach from the start. She goes on, quote, "Don't just advertise in the real estate section," she explains. "Go where the masses are. Go where the consumer's at. That means mapping where your target clients actually spend their time, what they need, what they read, where they gather, what they do recreationally, and building visibility there instead." Think about that. Like, if all I'm doing is throwing darts out to a board, hoping something just sticks out there, I'm not running a business. I'm literally just grasping for straws, trying to find anything I can to try to grow my business. I'm not thinking of this strategically at all. I'm not even maximizing my time correctly. But like, what if you were to do that? What if you were to go through, if you've been a real estate agent, what if you were to go through your data right now, look at all past previous clients, look at the areas of your town that they bought homes in or where you listed most homes from, and look at the demographic in those areas, and then do exactly what she just said, right? Where do they spend their time? Where do those people go? What's the age group that they have? Are they involved in schools? Are they go to the community parks? Where are these people at? Do they serve on committees? Are they bankers? Who are these people? That's where you go. You go there, you serve, you be involved, you get them out, you get yourself out there in front of them so you're visible. When you understand your demographic and who you represent, that tailors the social media marketing that you do, that tailors, the videos you might record. It begins to, resonate with the demographic that you're actually targeting. And you're no longer just throwing darts out there, hoping just something kind of sticks, right? You're being way more strategic. Goes on, direct mail isn't dead, it's just being done wrong. The standard real estate postcard, headshot, market update, call to action has trained recipients to ignore it on contact, right? All those little postcards and stuff you get with a picture of you and stats and all that kind of stuff, everybody's doing that. It's overdone. I'm not saying it's a dead thing, but you're just kind of being like everybody else, right? She goes on, it says, that's not an argument against direct mail, it's an argument against generic direct mail. McQuade's approach looks nothing like the industry standard. She sends an oversized 11 by 17 foldable mailer titled "Important Numbers You Need to Know." This is a great idea. With the White House and the Pentagon listed first. The piece is designed to be kept, not discarded. Its size means it physically wraps the rest of the mail in the stack, guaranteeing it gets handled. Now, here's the thing though, is I guarantee you if you were to talk to McQuade a little bit more, I bet she's not just mailing this out to mass groups of people. If you go back to what she said a minute ago about her targets, and I guarantee you she understands her demographics and the subdivision she works in, and that's where she's sending these mail outs. She's becoming the pillar in those communities. That's what she's focused on. She's probably zoned in on a very small section of her town. I mean, I say small, it's got to have a few hundreds of homes and has a high turnover rate and all that kind of stuff. But she's zeroed in. And she's pulling all of her resources and getting to know that market and becoming the expert in that market. And that's probably where she's doing the mail outs, right? In a digital saturated market, tangible touch points carry disproportionate weight precisely because so few agents invest in doing them well. The bar to clear isn't high. It just requires actually thinking about whether a recipient would want to keep what you're sending. It says referral businesses are built on experiences, not transactions. That's absolutely true, right? If my client has had a great experience with me and they felt taken care of and I was consistent in my communication, I actually communicated with them regularly, and I delivered an exceptional result for them in the end, even though I might have had bumps. A lot of times when you go through a transaction and you hit a massive speed bump in a difficult situation, it's your time to shine. That is the time you step up. And you got to have knowledge, you got to have experience, you got to know where to get that knowledge, and you got to know where to get that experience. But when you show up, it's in those moments that you win a client for life that leads to referrals. That's the experience they're looking for. That's where you shine. That is your value proposition. When it gets difficult, you shine. There's a meaningful difference between an agent who closes deals professionally and one who creates experiences that clients retail, telling stories. McQuade calls hers a raving fan business, a deliberate framing that shifts the entire operating model. Drawing on principles from Disney's approach to sensory environment design, she treats every client touch point as an intentional choice. Fresh baked cookies in the office, thoughtful environmental details, consistent human warmth. So she does, and there is a book. I got it somewhere. Yeah, right here. Yeah, right here. Yeah. This is the book, Raving Fans. Let me change that. Raving Fans by Clint Blanchard. That is a book that talks about raving fans and how to have raving fans, and it's kind of all about like building a referral business. That is really what this leans into. Really easy, short read. Look at that, guys. I mean, it's a short read, but check it out. It's a good little book. All right, the agents playing the long game send gifts when they lose. Here's a practice most agents would never consider. McQuade sends a gift after a listing appointment she didn't win. Okay. Align yourself with the local businesses like a florist or bakery, she explains. Shortly after the listing appointment, send a treat. The reason is strategic. Sellers remember which agents behaved with grace when there was nothing left to gain. Listings expire. Agents underperform. Circumstances change. Now, I will say this. I'd be a little careful. Like if I would immediately do that, but if that client ends up getting a listing, like a listing contract signed, it's active, I wouldn't send any correspondence. You could check with your state regulations and stuff and code of ethics and things like that would definitely get you in trouble. So I would be very careful with this. But like if you do it immediately, like you have the appointment and maybe they said that you didn't get the listing and you just immediately send that, I think you can get by with that for sure. And that's a great touch, right? You're just putting it in their memory. It's like, yeah, you might not list with me because you didn't like how honest I was about your property. The other agent kind of want to tell you about what your home is worth. Maybe it's not really worth that. Remember me when it expires, right? Remember me. All right. The through line. None of these strategies is secret. Most agents have encountered versions of all of them. What McQuade's approach makes clear is that knowing isn't the differentiator. Consistent execution is. The agents who build businesses that outlast market cycles aren't the ones with the most tools or the biggest teams. So true, guys. They're the ones who do the unglamorous relationship building work repeatedly and without shortcuts in good markets and difficult ones alike. Consistency, right? And that's it. I mean, if I was to get into the data of this, data shows that most of your business, like most of the real estate agent's business, I think it was like 72, 76% of your high performing real estate producers said they get their business from referrals. And if that's what the highest earners in our industry are saying, you got to ask yourself, what are they doing to generate referrals? They're doing some version of this type of relationship building. I assure you, that's what they're doing. They're very relational, very connecting, very all about networking, that kind of stuff. So what would be my action items for this, right? What would I say to do? Well, I would absolutely every single day, the first 2 hours, maybe even of your day, call it CEO time, whatever you want to call it, right? We're not talking about emails. We're not talking about posting things on social media. We're talking about only outbound connection, calls, texts, coffee appointments, meetings, all that kind of stuff with the core of your advocates, the people that you would call that, like that book, raving fans, those that are your raving fans that you pour your time and resources into cultivating that relationship, understanding their families and knowing what they're going through as life, doing life with them, meeting them where they are. Like I would spend at least at a minimum 2 hours every single day connecting with the people you would consider your raving fans, your advocates, right? Especially those that have already given you referrals. They need to be in your A list, in your CRM, 100%. And that's another tip. I mean, if you don't have a system inside of your CRM, you need to develop one. You can call it ABC. That's the most basic way. A being the hottest lead, gives me referrals, my best friends, that kind of stuff, family, that's your A. B is someone's, past client that's used you before. Maybe they haven't referred you, consistently, or maybe not at all, but you did sell a house to them. And C being just your natural inbound leads. And then you can get more hyper-focused there. You can take that and go even more specific if you need to. But that's a basic structure there for CRMs. You can check out that. I would also, make sure that your value proposition that you develop for yourself is right on point with the service you want to deliver to your clients. That aids in the professionalism that you're offering and delivers a consistent perspective to the client so they know exactly what to expect. And that's crucial. You got to be able to offer consistency to the clients. So when they know what that consistency is, they're more apt to refer more business to you. If you're inconsistent in your communication, in your styles, in your delivery, all this kind of stuff, they're going to be less likely to refer business to you. And you're not really necessarily building an advocate value-based model. You're kind of just reactionary to what's going on. And that can lead to jeopardizing your overall growth as a real estate agent in time, right? So I would definitely do that. Now, the last tip I'm going to give you on this topic here, and most agents don't do this, but I would encourage you to review your P&L statements. You need to look and get into your data. If you don't have any kind of financial management software that you're using to plug in your income and expenses and where you can do reports, you need to do so. You've got to start operating as if you are a business owner. And the P&L statements, the profit and loss statements of your business show you where your money's going and what is working. If you don't know your metrics, and you don't know the data, you're not making decisions that are informed. You're reactionary to what's going on, and you fall into the trap of doing what everybody else is doing. And that is a trap. You don't do what everybody else is doing because they could be doing something that's wrong and not working. How do you quantify that the person that you're observing is doing what they're supposed to be doing to grow a business? And then how you take all of that information and say, well, if I do that, I'm going to make business too. How does that correlate to the way you operate? Are you just like them in every way? What works for them might not necessarily work for you. So knowing your numbers and your data and getting your finances is absolutely crucial. Okay, I've got one more article. We're going to burn through this real quick, and then we're going to wrap up the day. All right? Actually, the week. This is my last live stream for the week. All right. This article here is by Realtor.com, posted February 25th, 2026. Let's see if it says who. It doesn't really say. It's by the Resource Center. So we're just going to go through this real quick. What we're going to read about here is Realtor.com is identifying kind of the digital breadcrumbs, if you will, that suggest when a homeowner is getting ready to list, probably maybe even before they even call an agent. So this is kind of like that predictive analytic era. I foresee a very very near future where realtors, AI, CRMs, and things like that are analyzing the leads inside of your database. It's going to analyze social media accounts and things like that they're doing online across the board and get really good at suggesting to you when somebody's most likely to sell. I think the data is getting there. There's a lot of metrics that are being tracked that's never been tracked before. Borderline creepy, right? But I think that's coming very soon. It's kind of already has arrived in some degrees. But right now where it's not so integrated into our systems, we need to be thinking about this and how do we apply this to our business, right? So but let's go ahead and get into this conversation because I think we need to be paying attention to some signals. Like if I want to be able to make sure that I get in front of the right sellers to get listings, there are certain signals that kind of are sent out that we just need to have our ears attuned to be able to pay attention. And this isn't about just trying to get as many listings as possible just for the sake of listings. I mean, that's the game. But it's ultimately if I understand their needs and I'm paying attention to their desires and their struggles, then I am the best realtor for them. I'm the one that has paid attention. And if you go back to this whole live stream talking about HELOCs and everything else, it's like, if you are knowledgeable in real estate, you are the best candidate to help these people in these life changes. So let's talk about this. Most sellers don't wake up one morning and decide to move. The decision usually takes shape quietly through small life changes, passing comments, or subtle shifts in how they talk about their home. This is another thing going back to what I just said, is where if you're involved with your biggest fans and you're engaged with them and you're reaching out to them every day and you're cycling through, you're in relationship with them. You're going to be able to pick up on these cues because you're actively in communication with them. And you're going to be able to pay attention when they're making comments about certain life changes. And that's what this is going to be leaning into. It says, long before someone asks, how much is my home worth, or requests a listing appointment, they're often processing the idea in their mind. A new job, a growing family, a conversation about downsizing, or even a sudden focus on home projects can signal that a move is starting to feel possible, even if it's not yet certain. For agents, spotting these early signals is all about paying attention to the people already in your sphere and recognizing when a thoughtful, well-timed check-in might actually be helpful. We got to pay attention. We got to slow down and listen to our sphere, but we have to be engaged with them. All right. What's the first one it talks about? It talks about life changes that often precede a move. So we're talking about major life changes are often the earliest indicators that someone may be thinking about selling. These shifts don't always feel urgent, but they often prompt people to rethink their space, location, and lifestyle needs. It says you can see this play out in national data too. And you can go to the NAR, it says that right here, NAR profile of home buyers and sellers reports that the most common reason sellers move is to be closer to friends or family. That's 26%, followed by homes feeling too small, 10%, or too large, 10%. And changes in family situation, reinforcing that life transitions, not just market timing, is often the drive decision to sell. Job changes are another big trigger. Family dynamics can spark similar reflection, growing households, children moving out, those type of things. When we go back to our original conversation of this live stream, we start talking about HELOCs and different life changes and the homes and what they live in. We talk about the lock-in effect. All of this coincides with these conversations becoming more and more prevalent, and we need to be paying more and more attention because, to be honest, our biggest demographic that's looking to buy right now is going to be of the older retiring demographic. Think baby boomers and things like that. They have the most life changes right now. Lifestyle reevaluation is another subtle cue. When homeowners talk about downsizing, walkability, or the effort required to maintain their home, it usually points to shifting priorities. So when you're engaged with people and they're making comments like this, that's kind of where their mind's at. It's like, man, I'm spending all this money on these expenses and I got to fix this and I got to do this. And right, that becomes that point of tension where they maybe are thinking about selling. It's an early cue. Doesn't mean they're necessarily ready, but it's an early cue. Home-related behaviors that signal preparation. Some of the strongest seller signals appear in behavior rather than in conversation. These actions often indicate that someone is mentally preparing for change, even if they haven't said it out loud. So doing more home repairs projects, fixing long-delayed issues, repainting rooms, investing in curb appeal, like sprucing everything up. You know, when you start seeing those kind of stuff, if you're canvassing an area and you start seeing those type of things, that can suggest that there is a thought process taking place in the homeowners there that they might be leaning more towards putting their house on the market and changing their life circumstances. Decluttering is another strong signal. Think yard sales and things like that when they're getting rid of stuff galore. Sometimes they're just decluttering. I love to declutter. I'd like to do more. But sometimes that's a signal. Finally, organizing the garage often surfaces before a move feels real. So those are indications. Language cues that signal early consideration. Pricing curiosity is another signal. If they're asking about, hey, what's price? What's the real estate market doing there? What do you think my home's worth? Those type of things. Timing language may also pop up. Mentions of maybe next year after the kids finish school or once work settles down. That indicates that people are starting to place the idea of moving onto a loose timeline. This article we're just talking about getting you thinking here, paying attention, right? Thinking through what these things look like. How to reach out without making it awkward. Now, here's a little bit of action items inside of this. It says value-based check-ins work best. Instead of asking directly if someone is ready to sell, anchor outreach to something relevant, a market shift in their neighborhood, a question they raised earlier, or information tied to a life change they mentioned. So I would just go back to what I was encouraging you guys to do. Like, if you are actively every single day engaging with the raving fans in your industry, then this is where I would encourage you to lean heavily into. I would say that would be a great place to go. People are saying they can't hear me. Can you guys hear me? Let me know in the comments. How to track seller signals without overthinking it. Spotting seller signals is only useful if you can't remember them later. The goal isn't a complex system. It's capturing small notes that help you recognize patterns over time. A simple CRM note is often enough. And awareness comes before action. Most sellers don't announce their plans up front. Decisions to move usually take shape quietly through shifting priorities and subtle signals that surface over time. Just conversation, guys. Wanted to give you some ideas to be thinking through, just giving more context to the entire conversations we've been going over. And that's the whole point of what we've been talking about. There's so much stuff that we can be thinking about in regards to economy and when things begin to shift. When we start looking at the lock-in effect and the older demographic and what people might be thinking, there is just a lot to go over. So there you go. that's a lot of content for today's show. That is all I've got for today and this week. We will be picking this back up come Monday morning. Just as a heads up, next week will be a little bit of an off week for me. I got to do some traveling. I will be here live Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, where you're watching me right now. So that will be happening. I will not be here on Tuesday or Wednesday, but I'll be back on the following Thursday. So hopefully you guys can have a good rest of the day, a great weekend, and we will see you guys here again on Monday. And like always, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch me go through all this type of information and go through this content. It's greatly appreciated. I don't take that for granted. So thank you for that. I do appreciate that. That is your real estate brief for today. If you found this helpful, please consider hitting the like button to tell YouTube you would like more of this type of content. And would you please consider subscribing to join a community of real estate agents that are focused on building a business that is relationship focused. There's always more, but I'm going to say that until Monday. Take care and have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you then.